world of cable news screaming and social media echo chambers, it's easy to lose the signal in the noise. Every day, policy is debated, votes are cast, and your tax dollars are spent. We cut through the headlines to bring you the critical context you need, focusing on what's really going on in news and politics. Welcome to the Analytical Iowan Podcast. This is your daily dose of fact-driven politics. Let's analyze today's news. Here's Eric.
And we are back here on the Analytical Iowan Podcast. It is Friday, January 23rd, as I'm recording this. Now, recording it later than I would have liked to today. I was doing better about being ahead, and today got away from me, got off work later than I planned. By the time I got home, it was later. By the time I read some news stories, everything got out of hand. So I'm recording this on Friday. It may be the early morning hours of Saturday before this actually gets posted if everything goes according to plan. Now, as I say almost every day, we got a lot to talk about, and there's always a lot to talk about. And I want to ask you guys a question to start off before I get into everything I want to talk about. Do you guys like the TikTok live format podcasts? I know there seems to be pretty good response when Mike the Rational Boomer does them. If you guys like them, drop a comment. If you guys don't want me to do them, if you think they're dumb, drop a comment. If you want me to do a regular podcast as well on the days I do the lives and just have that as bonus content. It's the only way I know what you guys are thinking. I like doing the lives because it gives me a chance to interact and, calm people's fears and minds. And depending on the time of day I get in, I talk to a different group of people. And sometimes that's nice where you get to deal with and you meet people you normally wouldn't have interacted with. So let me know what you guys think about those. Now, speaking of TikTok, that's where I want to start. The sale is supposedly officially finalized and TikTok is sold. Okay, now what does that mean? Well, we don't entirely know. Now, there was a new set of guidelines out, another set of rules. We will see what comes from the new rules. One of the things now I saw that I had to opt out of was targeted ads for things outside of TikTok for things I saw while watching TikTok. And you had to opt out of it. So if I saw content related to, Legos, for example, as well, you guys can't see them now, but, there's Legos behind me in some of my frames that I would get targeted Lego ads, things like that. And that's typical American business, right? We want to make all the money off of everybody we can. So we're going to find a way to make this into a money making scheme. Now, I don't know what the Creator Rewards Fund is going to look like going forward. The last few months, they have paid me pennies, literally. I think last month I made a whole 21 cents, and I'm on pace right now to make 6 or 7 cents on the month over on TikTok. So, I'm very far from being able to retire and doing this full time. We also don't know what the new TikTok sale is going to mean in regards to left leaning content. Now, it feels like my content has been buried for months now, where it's ever since the TikTok sale deal had been started by Donald Trump. So, who knows what's going to happen with TikTok with this sale. And if it ends up not being a safe home anymore, I will move to another service. And if they kill off TikTok like Elon Musk basically did with Twitter, well, then it's what happens. I'd be sad to see it go, but I would move to another platform. And I would just primarily host my content over on YouTube. YouTube does effectively the same thing for me that TikTok does. I'm getting a decent following. In fact, because TikTok has been burying my content, I'm getting close to matching my follower content. Actually, not matching, I should say. I'm wrong. I've got about 850 followers right now on YouTube. I've got about 10K on TikTok. I was jumping ahead of myself there, but I'm getting close to, I'm making great progress over on YouTube. Um, and as I said when I first started this podcast, I'm typically not going to redo edits, and I'm just going to go with it. So yeah, that's what that was. Um, but the whole thing with TikTok being under new ownership, we are just going to have to wait it out and see what is going on, what happened, how does uh, it affect everything. Now, all of the business leaders and the whole group that owns TikTok now, and apparently they're going to be retraining the algorithm and whatever that means, and that could kill TikTok as well, because the one thing that made TikTok unique and special from all of the other apps was the algorithm. And now they have uh, the ability to retrain it, and they're going to, fuck with it. That can't be good, right? If you're looking at it from a user standpoint, screwing with something that is the backbone of an app is probably going to mess it up. So we're going to have to just wait it out and see what happens with TikTok and if it stays safe for people like us. So far from my interactions, I am still seeing content and I am still seeing interactions with people outside of the United States. There was some concern that it was going to become a US only entity, or that we would have to download a different copy to get access to the rest of the world and things like that. And that hasn't happened that I've seen as of yet. Now that could change, and keeping my eyes out for what comes next. Uh, as always, if you're listening to this podcast, you've either found me on YouTube or Spotify. Follow me on the other one, as well as checking me out over on Blue Sky. All of my content gets up over there. And if I have to start posting on YouTube as my primary, I will. And I will only do it if TikTok forces my hand. I mean, as long as my stuff is continuing to get at least some views, some traction, and I keep gaining some followers, I will keep, being over on TikTok. But the minute it starts getting dumb, and if they decide to kick me off, then I'll have to go somewhere else. All right. Now, Donald Trump was in Davos and he had this economic forum, right? And he didn't host the economic forum, but he was there. And it went horribly for Donald Trump. Okay. It went horribly. He looked old. He looked frail, low energy. He looked weak. And then he launches this board of peace. Now, I believe that peace board announcement came Thursday, came yesterday. They had the initial launching and the ceremony and all of this, right? But two of the leaders that were supposed to be there couldn't go. Benjamin Netanyahu and Vladimir Putin were not there. They couldn't attend. Why? Because they have active warrants out from the International Criminal Court, and if they stepped foot into Switzerland, they would have been arrested. Now, I don't know for sure that Donald Trump has any warrants from the International Criminal Court. The United States does not recognize the International Criminal Court. And I had somebody ask me about that and what it would take. I'm looking into what it would take for the United States to recognize the International Criminal Court. Uh, I believe it would just take an act of Congress signed by the president, but Donald Trump would never sign it. And why don't we recognize it? Well, one of the reasons we do not recognize the International Criminal Court is this idea of our own sovereignty, right? We're a sovereign nation, and we don't want the International Criminal Court to be able to, or we don't recognize it, so we're not going to extradite our own people to the International Criminal Court to have them stand trial for international crimes. However, we help prosecute other people from other countries in the International Criminal Court. Remember, Jack Smith, that's where he got his start. Before he got appointed as the special counsel looking into Donald Trump, he was a prosecutor in the International Criminal Court. He was putting away war criminals. That is why everything Jack Smith did was very well thought out, very well planned out. And somebody like Donald Trump had, was way outmatched. The only reason he got away, did Donald Trump, with everything that he did, was because he had a pet judge in Florida in Aileen Cannon, who by all rights should have been appealed to the Fifth Circuit and completely overturned. Jack Smith was trying to make sure he had an airtight case to get her tossed for judicial misconduct. And because they dragged everything out. That was the one thing Donald Trump's attorneys were very good at, was dragging everything out. They dragged everything out. And beyond that, you also had Mitch McConnell, who's at fault for not agreeing to impeach and remove Donald Trump, or to remove Donald Trump upon impeachment after the January 6th attacks, and said, well, it's a criminal justice matter. And then Merrick Garland sat on his hands for 2 years before appointing a special counsel. If Merrick Garland had put Jack Smith in charge in, say, 2021, at the rate Jack Smith had things up and going, if he would have been appointed, say, February 2021, Jack Smith would have been, by June, by June of 24, I think is when he had everything going. He had it up in like 8 months. He would have had he would have been ready for trial by the end of 2021, and Donald Trump probably would have been out of stalling tactics by the end of 22, maybe 23. The trial would have happened, and Donald Trump would have been convicted and probably out of appeals. He probably wouldn't have been a factor, but Merrick Garland drug his heels in and said, well, it's a political matter. It's not really a legal matter, but Mitch McConnell had said it was a criminal matter and not political. So both sides wanted the other to deal with Donald Trump, and said, well, I don't want to be the one to make that move. And then you had Joe Biden, who, because he did not want it to appear to be political, he went to Merrick Garland and said, okay, you're the attorney general, whatever you say. You're the attorney general. The DOJ is supposed to be separate. Now, as far as this back to the world peace thing, this peace board that Donald Trump tried to start, he is the founding member of this peace board, right? And all of these countries are, supposedly paying $1 billion each to be on this peace board. But they don't really say what the money's going for. They say, yeah, it's going for peace and it's going to help rebuild Gaza. But when we hear him talk about rebuilding Gaza, it sounds like he wants to build Trump Resort Gaza and other resorts like that. Not really the idea for, peace. What about the people that live there? Well, they don't care. They don't give two shits about the people that live there. Now, one of the things about this peace board that Donald Trump created, like half or more than half of the countries that Donald Trump has gotten on board for this thing are countries that would be affected by his Muslim travel ban, that he would not welcome into this country. They were the same countries that were put under bans during COVID under Donald Trump, that were routinely tossed out because of racial discrimination. Donald Trump doesn't actually care about these people. He's just using them to get his way. Now, he thinks this peace board is going to end up being something that may work alongside and then ultimately replace the UN. I can tell you from what I've seen about this peace board, here's what's going to happen. Okay. He's trying to create this peace board again to set up a narrative. Well, see, I created a board of peace and I'm a peaceful person, so give me a real Nobel Peace Prize. Says the man who, in an open text message that he himself leaked, was talking with the president or prime minister of Norway and said, Well, the reason I'm going after Greenland and I'm thinking about doing it militarily is because the time for peace is over. You didn't give me the peace prize, so I'm going after it, right? The time to think about peace is over, is what Donald Trump said. But see, creating this peace board is his way of saying, well, see, I'm a peaceful person. It's all bullshit. It's another grift, and it's another thing for Donald Trump to go back on down the road. And Donald Trump, he's wishy washy on a lot of things. Now, one of the things that came out from his 2 days in Davos, he looked awful. Okay. He was walking down the red carpet, and look up the video. He's staggering. He's, making a figure eight or an S pattern at least. And if I was told to walk a line by a police officer and I walked one the way he did down that red carpet, they'd haul me off for drunken public. At least suspicion of drunken public, even if I blew a perfect zero. Seriously, it is that bad. Then he's up there on the lectern and he's leaned over. He's got a big lean, and he's got a death grip on that podium. Those are signs of dementia. The lean, the inability to walk a straight line. He was kind of slurring his speech a little bit, and he spoke a lot. He didn't really say a lot. When he was at Davos, he said things that were unhinged. Like he said, well, without the United States, that most of everybody would be speaking German, yet Switzerland speaks German. Uh, at least a good number of people in Switzerland speak German, as do a lot of people in Europe, because a lot of people in Europe are multilingual. Um, and then when he was talking about his board of peace, he was talking about NATO and was questioning whether or not NATO needed to be a thing, and said, well, did they really come to our aid? And well, they were kind of on the back lines. I've said it before, I'm going to say it again. Article 5 of the NATO Charter has only ever been invoked once. The last time Article 5 and the only time Article 5 was ever invoked, and Article 5 says an attack against one nation is an attack against all. The only time it was ever used was right after the September 11th attacks, and we invoked it. And every NATO member on some level joined us in Afghanistan. And I don't have the stats and figures in front of me, but they all had casualties. They all had wounded or killed soldiers. And yet Donald Trump wants to say, well, did they really help? Donald Trump is very much looking at this from a, well, what'd you do for me lately standpoint. And I really think that one of the things he was talking about during his first term, he kept talking about the countries having to pay more, having to pay more, having to pay more. And it's because he didn't understand the talking point, the sticking point of NATO. Okay. What a lot of people, when they were irritated with NATO, what they are complaining about is that most of the countries have agreed to spend 2% of their GDP on defense. And some of the NATO countries were not doing that because either their state budgets didn't have it or what have you. Well, he was mad about that. He was big mad. And he kept saying, well, I got to get you to pay more. I think he thought that NATO had a big checking account. He was going to find a way to drain that checking account into his own coffers. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. Donald Trump is all about doing things that drain money into his own coffers. Now, that's one of the things with this oil from Venezuela, right? He's supposedly sold off $500 million worth of oil to Venezuela. Okay, how does he have the right to sell off Venezuelan oil? It's not ours. It is property, or should be property, of Venezuela and Venezuelan uh, oil companies. But see, Donald Trump doesn't care about that. So he supposedly sold off these 500 million barrels or $500 million worth, and the money didn't go to the U.S. Treasury. It's sitting in a bank account, at least that's what's being reported, in Qatar, offshore account in the nation of Qatar, a nation that funds uh, terrorism, or at least has ties to terroristic groups. And Donald Trump put the money from this $500 million sale of oil over there. How does he think that that money gets to go there? It's in an account only he can control. Well, how does any of that work? So what happens when he's gone, when he's no longer president? Does he still the only one who can control it? Is it a situation where the U.S. has it, but we can't transfer it anywhere? Is the money sitting there to go back to Venezuela? He's not coming out with the details because he doesn't have any, for one. He's just doing whatever he wants, and he hopes nobody's going to bat an eye and let him get away with it because that's what he does, right? He doesn't have a game plan anymore. He just does things, um, however he thinks about them. Now, one of the things he came away from with this trip to Davos was this framework. He says he's got a framework of a deal with NATO on Greenland. And we're hearing conflicting things about this Greenland deal. That they're apparently going to give him pockets of Greenland was one deal. And then I saw another conflicting article where the uh, president of NATO or the head of NATO said, yeah, we didn't talk about Greenland at all. But he says that they've got a deal where he basically gets to control pockets of Greenland, which is probably just going to be the land around the bases we already have there, which he already controlled anyway. And they're going to call it probably sovereign U.S. soil. And Donald Trump can build whatever he wants, which by treaty he could already do. Now, there's a creator over on TikTok. You guys might be familiar with him. He goes by Legal Dad. Legal Dad put out a video, and I want to give credit where credit is due. He's also on YouTube, I believe. And he goes, the thing with Donald Trump that he doesn't realize about a lot of things is that he could get the same thing with different, by going about a different way, and he would look like a genius and he would look great. But he's not capable of doing that. For example, if he really believed Greenland was all about it needed to be secured and more about defense and things like that, if he would have went to the NATO allies and said, hey Denmark, hey NATO, I'm worried about this, and this. Here's what the intelligence is saying. I think we need to shore up our defenses on Greenland, and we need to put extra bases, and extra troops and maybe missiles and things like that on Greenland for defense. NATO would have come out and probably said, yeah, that's backed up with some intel and things like that, and we're good to go. But that's not what Donald Trump did. He comes out, well, you're going to give us Greenland. I'm going to take Greenland. Greenland needs to be part of the United States. It needs to be ours so we can defend ourselves. It's a secure national security issue. He's making enemies out of allies by doing things like that. And if he would change his tone, you probably could have gotten a lot different thing. Just like, initially when he got Mexico and Canada to put extra border security and other measures in place. If he would have gone about it a different way, they probably would have come to the table with him and come to some sort of a peace deal and done it peacefully. But instead, he goes, "I'm putting tariffs on everybody, and you're not until you do this, until you do this, until you do this." But see, Donald Trump can't be diplomatic for multiple reasons. One, he doesn't know how. I guarantee you, he doesn't know how. And that's one of the things MAGA cheers about him because they think that because he is tough or appears and acts tough, that makes him a good leader, but he's not. Um, but he doesn't know how to do any of that. He's not a negotiator. He's a bully, right? Also, going in and in his mind, going to him with intelligence and talking to him diplomatically would be going hat in hand, begging them to do something. And that's not who Donald Trump is. He doesn't beg for anything. He orders, he dictates. He wants to be the boss, right? So he could have come up with a better solution there and probably come to the same thing. Now, what was not seen, or what I haven't seen, is anything about any sort of rare earth mineral um, agreement with Greenland. And then Donald Trump comes back after saying he has a deal. He comes back and kind of hints that he still may try to go after it militarily. Donald Trump is influenced by the latest group of people he talks to. Depends on what group of advisors he's around and who he's dealing with. And that's who gets to decide what he thinks. He's not in the right state of mind anymore. And the fact that he is still allowed to make executive decisions is pretty telling. The Republicans don't have a spine to stand up to him yet because they haven't decided that it's bad enough for them politically. It's going to have to get worse yet than this for them to have to stand up and say, no, we're not doing that. Okay. Um, Now, Donald Trump was on Air Force One coming back from Davos, and he had a slip of the tongue. And he basically said, peace is very destructive. We can't have peace. And what he meant to say was war and how bad war is. But he was talking about the little wars he ended and stuff. And then he said, well, peace is destructive. And he never caught himself. He didn't realize he even said anything wrong. And again, that just shows that his mind is slipping. You add in the walk, you add in the leaning on the podium where he's standing at such an angle, the bruising on his hands, which he had another bruise on his hand. And he claims that he clipped it on the table. But if you watch the interview, him giving the speech where he claims to have hit it on the table, that doesn't seem to be the case. But it's in a very weird spot. It's on his left hand, about here. Don't know what that's all about. That doesn't look like an IV spot, so I don't know where that. But it's a very deep, dark purple bruise. Um, and he's, one of the other reasons why they're saying he bruises so easily now is because of his aspirin regimen. He claims to be taking 325 milligrams of aspirin daily. Now, normally when they put you on low dose aspirin if they think you have heart problems, etc., they give you 81 milligrams. This is 4 times that. And Donald Trump is saying, well, I got such low, thin blood, it's all good and everything else. One of the things I think might be going on is that they're actually giving him, and he calls it now big aspirin. They're probably giving him a bigger pill. It is probably not aspirin. It is probably something else. It is probably some anti-dementia medication, something like that. Maybe major blood thinners, um, or something, right? And they're telling him it's just aspirin. Because if they told him what it really was, he wouldn't want to take it because he thinks he's in perfect health. He thinks he's got the body of a 20-year-old, despite the fact that he is 79, almost 80. He will be 80 this year. Donald Trump is not doing well. And we're just waiting at this point for the day when that one big, beautiful obituary gets written. Now, going over to the House of Representatives for a little bit, there was a funding bill. They passed in the House with 7 Democrats signing on. And I'm a little irritated with those 7 Democrats. Now, this funding bill was probably going to pass anyway. But why'd they vote for it? I don't know. But it has extra spending and extra funding for ICE. Now, they're going to try to spin it. Well, it's just the typical 10-year or just the typical yearly budget. It's the same $10 billion that was appropriated under Joe Biden. Well, yes, under Joe Biden, there was 10 billion going to ICE. But above and beyond that, in the one big bullshit bill, the Republicans gave ICE an additional 18 billion in addition to their typical yearly allotment. So that would be 28 billion. That would be almost triple. And they voted to triple it. Basically to triple ICE's salary or ICE's budget. And we're hearing they're getting all kinds of bonuses and things like that and it's for the cruelty they're causing. Donald Trump is perfectly fine with everything going on. Kristi Noem, perfectly fine. In fact, saying, well, yeah, if you're an American citizen, you should be expected to have your identification and your papers on you. Really? First of all, ICE is not supposed to be detaining U.S. citizens. Their extent of their um, ability for law enforcement ends unless it is in conjunction to something they are doing, like you are harboring somebody or you're preventing them from actually detaining somebody, something like that. Um, the minute they find out you're a citizen, they're not supposed to have interactions with you. They're supposed to turn it over to typically the FBI or, depending on the situation, if you have a weapon or something like that, maybe the ATF. Um, but to somebody else, right? They're not to be going after American citizens. But this group of ICE agents does not care. They will go after whoever they want. The cruelty is the point. Now, JD Vance was up in Minnesota. He went to go check things out, talk with ICE, of course, give them high fives, tell them they're doing a good job. We like what we're seeing. Because he didn't badmouth ICE. And of course, there was another incident involving ICE, and they were talking about it. And he said, "Well, you're preventing us from going after sexual predators, right? Why and why would you stop us from doing that? Just tell us where they are." Well, I'm sure you've seen the TikToks. We can tell you where one is. That is 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. If he's not at Mar-a-Lago, but see, JD doesn't want to deal with any of that. Basically, he was there to try to, uh, you know, showcase that he was doing something. Now, I think this is part of a ploy by the Republicans, having JD Vance get out and doing some of these things, trying to get him out and be more visible. Okay, why? Because they know Donald Trump is fading. We've been talking about Donald Trump fading for a while. And when when the time finally comes for JD Vance to step up and become president, they want people to be aware of who he is and that he's actively been seen out doing things, even if it's nothing overly important, or you know, it's stuff like this where he goes up and he just basically tells ICE, "Yeah, keep doing what you're doing." Now that message isn't going to resonate with most of the Americans. However, with MAGA, they're all for everything ICE is doing because it's going after people they don't like. It's all about skin color, it's all about race, because they say, well, they shouldn't be here illegally. And you can make that argument. But they're so focused on that they don't realize the rest. They go, at the same time they will say, well, he's getting rid of the violent criminals, yet they're arresting people at job sites. Well, you should do it the legal way. They're arresting people who have citizenship. They're talking about denaturalizing people who did it the right way. Well, you should do it the right way again. And then they talk about people getting arrested who were going to court for their immigration hearings. Well, you should just self deport. Well, people were trying to do that too, getting on planes, trying to get out of the country, and they were getting caught up by ICE. It's all about cruelty at this point. And part of the reason why the cruelty is so bad, and we've talked about it, is because the Oath Keepers, the Three Percenters, the Proud Boys, etc., have all gotten roped into ICE. And it's because they were going to be cruel and they're loyal to Donald Trump. That's the big thing. Donald Trump wants things in groups and people that are loyal to him. Going back to this government funding bill for a minute. Now, the bulk of what was passed in the House is going to potentially avert another government shutdown if it clears the Senate. Now, there are a couple of hurdles in the Senate. And one of the hurdles being this does not include any money for the ACA subsidies. And that is one of the things I'm irritated that the Democrats did not get in this funding bill, at least the House version. Two, they need 60 votes in the the Senate to pass and to avoid the filibuster. And beyond getting past the filibuster, they attached something to this bill that Senate Republicans aren't willing, I don't think, to take up. What'd they do? Well, they put in there a provision repealing something that was in one of the last funding bills. And I think that was in the one that opened the government back up. And it was either in there or it was in the one big bullshit bill, one of the two. But it was a provision that would allow senators who had their phones confiscated to sue the United States government for damages to the tune of like $500,000 for everything that was taken off their device or something like that. So like if they got phone records, it was $500,000. If they got text messages, if it was $500,000. If they got this, it was $500,000. If they got data, it was more. And it was only for congressional Republicans, not anybody in Congress, just the ones in. I should say it was Senate Republicans, not congressional Republicans. It's only for the Senate. Well, the House put in a poison pill into this bill, where if it does pass the Senate, and assuming Donald Trump would sign it, which isn't even a guarantee, that they would not be able to collect on this deal anymore, right? It would prevent them from getting a payday because they were investigated by Jack Smith. Now, Jack Smith goes before Congress, and they subpoenaed him. And he was testifying in front of, I think it was the Oversight Committee. They were looking into Jack Smith and all of the charges that Donald Trump faced under Jack Smith. And they were trying to trip up Jack Smith. Well, wasn't it political weaponization? No. And he laid out part of his case in public about how he had the evidence, how he came to the conclusion that there were crimes, etc. He made them look foolish as he's sitting there. Which making Republicans look foolish isn't hard anymore because they're not serious. But see, they didn't want to hold this as a public hearing. They originally wanted it as a private hearing, just like they did with the Clintons. Why? Because they could cherry pick responses and they could edit clips and make it look like Jack Smith had said one thing when he really didn't. And Jack Smith was too smart. He was ready for him. They're going up against somebody who used to try war criminals in The Hague, in the International Criminal Court. But yet they think they're smart enough to hang with somebody like that. And they're just not. If I was Republicans on the Oversight Committee, I'd be embarrassed by everything. Now they're trying to hold, the Oversight Committee is trying to hold the Clintons in contempt for ignoring the subpoena. And what the Clintons said when they got subpoenaed over the Epstein files was, we'll come testify, we'll do it in public. Let's talk about everything in public. And they said no, they wanted it in private. Again, they wanted it to cherry pick the recordings and things like that. And they were also afraid that the Clintons would say something involving criminalizing Donald Trump, or at least it'd be incriminating for Donald Trump. They didn't want to deal with that. Not at all. So the Clintons didn't show up to be deposed in private. And now they want to go after him for contempt. And I don't know if that's going to work, but they're talking about trying. And we'll see what they do with that. Okay. Now, a couple things came out. First of all, we've got this massive ice storm and cold weather heading around the country. By the time you're hearing this, you've probably been in the brink of it for a day or two. It's so cold, we're hearing that the ground is popping, trees are exploding. Negative, I'm hearing negative actual temperatures of -20 to -30, with wind chills -40 plus in some parts of the country. Large quantities of ice coming through. Well, first of all, where's FEMA? Where's FEMA? I don't think they have any money. And if they do, because they've been playing budget roulette, trying to move FEMA money around to help fund ICE and immigration enforcement. So does FEMA have even any money or resources to do anything? Now, under Biden, we knew this storm was coming for several days. Trucks would have been loaded, things would have been staged. They would have been ready to roll and move and roll out FEMA aid to affected areas. But guess what? We're not hearing about any of that. So they're going to wait till it's over. And then the governors are going to sign disaster declarations. And Donald Trump will eventually, when he feels like it, and on a whim, get around to approving them. And it's going to take forever. I mean, remember the flooding last summer down in Texas? It took weeks for FEMA to roll in. And even then, they barely did anything. Um, there should have been a whole bunch of stuff already done. Donald Trump should have been talking about calling up the Guard in varying areas to have them ready. Maybe trying to bring in equipment and things from heavier cold areas like here in Iowa, where we're used to snow and ice, and getting them moved. Now we're hearing about a lot of the power companies are doing things and moving linemen around, and because they all work together, varying companies will work. Hey, I need to hire out crews from you guys to come to Iowa or whatever, or we need crews from Iowa to go to Oklahoma because of a tornado, whatever. Happens a lot. Uh, Years ago, I worked in a grocery store it had a kitchen in it, a deli. And in the early morning hours on those very bad winter days when we knew power was going to be an issue, we'd have linemen from all over the place, and we'd look outside, you'd see 20 trucks in the parking lot from varying companies, but they were all out trying to get power back on and restored. But where's the coordination coming from Donald Trump? It's not happening. Why? What are we dealing with here? We don't know, in part. And why are the estimates so far and so wild? Well, in part because one of the things Donald Trump cut was NOAA, the North Atlantic Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, something like that. National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration. There we go. I'd get there eventually. It's not an acronym I use very often, but and that's the group that oversees the National Weather Service. Remember, during Doge, they were cutting a bunch of meteorologists, and they were closing locations and saying, well, they'd have to deal with, we don't need them, all of these meteorologists, and they don't need to have somebody 24/7, so they can deal with getting their information from the next area over. And then you find out that, somebody wasn't on their post because there was nobody there. And that's how flooding gets missed and things. And one of the things they cut in some of their budgets was part of it was budgets for weather balloons. We're not sending up nearly as many weather balloons to help us track these storms and get better reads on what's going to happen. We have technology, we have the resources if they would be allowed to be used. But see, Donald Trump knows better, Doge knows better, and they don't like all of the research into the atmosphere and stuff that's going on because it leads back to global warming. And they've had a big push on global warming. They don't want to call it global warming. In fact, talking about this snowstorm, Donald Trump goes to Truth Social, and he basically says, "What is? I thought we had global warming with global warming all in caps. I don't. I'm maybe getting the wording slightly off here, but basically, oh, it's so cold, so I guess that means global warming isn't real." Is effectively what he said. What he doesn't understand, and I don't understand the science of it well enough to try to explain it. I know other creators out there have done a much better job explaining it. Um, but basically, because of global warming, it has changed how the Arctic's warmer than it used to be, which changes how the polar vortex works, which means it affects how the jet streams work. And basically, it causes the cold air to be able to go even deeper south. That's why you're talking and looking at ice in places like Louisiana and Georgia and other places like that. And it's all because of global warming or climate change. Now, again, this is one of those things that it's a messaging problem when we talk about global warming or climate change. Global warming just implies that it means the world is getting hotter, which yes, it is. But that means people that are simple-minded, like Donald Trump and his cult, go when it gets cold and colder than normal, they go, "Well, see, global warming isn't a thing." It's because we're messaging it wrong. Now, if when we talk about climate change, clearly climates have changed. I'm here in Iowa. Yeah, we're dealing with some cold, and we're used to dealing with some cold. But I remember, growing up, winters where you had pretty much from at some point, either at the end of October, early November, all the way through March, you almost always, all the way through, had 6 to 12 inches of snow on the ground. Maybe not on the streets, but it stayed cold enough almost all the way through winter that there was always snow, right? It wasn't the situation that we just had. We're dealing with, negative temps here, but a week ago or so, we were in the 50s, 40s. It was halfway nice. Climate change is a very real thing, and Donald Trump is trying to play off. Well, see, global warming ain't a thing because it's cold now. Once again, the messaging failed because we're doing it in a way that confuses the simple brained people. And Donald Trump doesn't. He's not the type of person to look deeper into things, and I guarantee you now, even less so. He's got certain people around him that only tells him certain things, and that's where he gets his talking points, and that's the end of it. Now we were talking about the weather and ice, right? Well, like I said, and we were talking a little bit earlier about FEMA. Well, I don't know where FEMA is as far as where the aid is, but they were talking with the few FEMA people that were out trying to do whatever help they can. This administration, specifically the Department of Homeland Security, was telling FEMA and other people and their representatives and the people, the DHS people that were out giving interviews in the affected areas and stuff. When it comes to talking about how bad this is, try to find another word for uh, what's going on rather than ice. Why? Because ice has got a negative connotation right now because of all the bullshit going on in Minneapolis and other places. Now I'm hearing they're going into Maine. They're talking about going into Philly. Um, Notice they're not going into Texas. Not well, I mean they are, but I hear they are going into Texas a little bit. But we're not hearing about anything in Texas nearly the same way that we're hearing about Minneapolis. So well, they don't have nearly the enforcement opportunities in Texas, for at least what we're hearing. Not nearly the numbers. And maybe I'm wrong, and maybe it's simply that well Texas is so big and a big chunk of Texas is red and they support everything that's going on. Maybe that's why we're not hearing anything. But because ICE has got such a bad connotation, they're being told in their official capacities when they're talking about stuff, don't talk about ICE. Don't talk about it. Ignore it. Use some other term because it sounds bad when you're talking about ICE and they think you're talking about immigration enforcement. And that's just wild to me that they are actively trying to avoid discussing what is actively going on because they know they screwed up. Now, speaking of screwing up, you got Donald Trump. And he's terrified of what's coming up, right? He knows the midterms are coming. And it doesn't look good for him. Was scrolling looking for some news articles to talk about before I recorded this podcast. And I came across this TikTok from a creator who got these poll numbers from Donald Trump. Okay, these are numbers from Trump. Now, I did not look into this poll myself, and I did not go verify this. And it showed him with like a 67% approval rating, right? That he's doing great with the economy, he's doing great with immigration and all this, right? Sounds great. But I guess she looked into it a little deeper, and I can't remember her name, or I'd give her credit. Um, where these poll numbers were from a poll that Donald Trump did that was sent out as part of a fundraising email. You know, the emails where he sends out something dumb like, I'm sitting here all alone in a room with it's just me and a computer, and everybody's with a dying battery, and everybody's gone home. You need to send money to help our crusade against the immigrants. That kind of bullshit. Well, apparently he sent one out that he was sending to just his most loyal followers, and you had to donate to take the poll. And it had a bunch of questions, and she went through some of them, like, "Are you a man, a woman, or are you insane? Are you a MAGA supporter, or are you uh, are you an insane liberal?" Something like that. Far right, radical liberal, and insane. All those kind of things, right? Like it was very, very biased toward Donald Trump. That kind of a question. And he still only, and it was a paid one where his supporters were donating him money, and he still only got a 67% approval rating. Those numbers are dismal. So that now it sounds like Donald Trump, in his weakened condition, where every time he gets out in public, he's looking frailer and frailer, and he wants to back off. He has said that his schedule's too busy and he needs to, take a lighter schedule already from being president. I mean, you know, a golf club trip every weekend is already, not light enough. But he wants to back his schedule off, except now he's going to go back out on the campaign trail. He's going to start campaigning here shortly for Republicans. And I hope he does. Why is he going to be campaigning for Republicans? For the midterms. Midterms are coming. Now, we got to keep talking about, we got to keep the pressure up, keep going out, when they do the No Kings thing, when there are other protests going, we got to keep the pressure up and keep showing the atrocities of this administration. But now Donald Trump is going to be hitting the campaign trail, trying to campaign for the Republicans because he's afraid of losing his majority. When the Republicans lose the House, and I think that's almost going to be a foregone conclusion, that they will lose the House. The question isn't if, it's by how many seats, and I think it could be anywhere from 30 to 50. And do they lose the Senate? And I think they could lose the Senate if they don't extend the ACA subsidies. That's kind of where I think, right? That in the end, he's gonna be out campaigning, trying to drum up support. And I think him campaigning is going to be actually worse for Republicans than if he wouldn't do anything. He could end up potentially costing them, I thought maybe 6 seats in the Senate. If Donald Trump gets out and campaigns, and if he pushes hard enough, maybe they lose 8. I mean, that's a long, long shot. But if he's only got 67% approval rating with people who are donating to his own poll and donating to his campaign and his cause, that should be setting off all these warning bells. And Donald Trump was bragging about how good his numbers are. Probably because he doesn't understand what he's actually saying and what he's actually doing. So we got to keep pushing toward the midterms. Midterms are coming. Primary season is starting. I think we are a little over 6 weeks-ish away from the first primaries. And from there, make sure you are paying attention to your state Every state is different when it comes to primaries, and not just primaries, but voting in general. Now, I was in a live with somebody. They were trying to say that in their state, they were not allowed to vote in the general election if they were not registered for a party. And I don't think that's right. I think it's just for the primaries. But I could be wrong. I do not know state laws in every state. But find out what your state primary laws are. If you need to be registered for a party, then register that party and go vote. And here's the thing. People think primaries don't matter. They do. You go in, you fight like hell to get the person you want elected in the primary. Okay? I will use an example from recent history, 2016, the presidential election and Bernie Sanders. If you really want Bernie, you fight like hell. You try to get Bernie the delegates in the primary, right? Cool. But then once that primary is over, and once the winner has been decided by the party or by the election or whatever. And I know primaries are a little different when it comes to like a presidential race than like your state rep. But let's say here in Iowa, okay, for governor, Rob Sand, I think he has a great chance of becoming governor. He's the only statewide elected Democrat currently. And there's other reasons why I like the message of Rob Sand as a Democrat, okay? But let's say he loses the primary. Cool. Then I need to okay, we tried Rob Sand. He didn't win the primary. Now, come November, we back the Democrat for governor. If you want real change, you need to vote for the other party. Just because my preferred candidate did not win does not mean I'd vote against the person that did win. So get out when it comes to the primaries and vote for the person you want and put as much effort into it as you are willing to put into it. If it is just showing up that day and voting, great. If it is putting up a couple signs, if it is attending a campaign event, great. However much effort you want to put into getting the person you want who think would be the best person in the primary, put all that effort in. And then afterward, even if your person loses, we have to defeat the problem that is MAGA and that is the Republicans in the midterms, and then also in 2028, so we can get back to fixing all of the problems that are going on now. All right, that's going to do it for the Analytical Iowan podcast for today. I want to thank you for taking the time to join me. I'm going to be doing more lives over on TikTok. Again, let me know if you like them, if you think I should continue doing them. And then from there, I'm also going to probably be jumping in with the Rational Boomer again for a podcast sometime soon, and maybe I will see if we can do another joint podcast where we record it for both shows. Again, let me know. Drop me a note in the comments if that's something you would enjoy. It's the only way I know if you guys want me to continue doing things like that. And eventually, I may open the floor up to more guests. Just as my schedule kind of straightens out and I've got a better idea of what I have available for time. Trying to do this around also working where I don't have a set time necessarily every day to record does make it a little harder for bringing people up as a guest and doing it that way. So I want to thank you for taking the time to join me. Hope you have a great day, and I will be back tomorrow.
That was Eric. That does it for our analysis today. If you appreciated us cutting through the noise to get to the critical context, please make sure you're subscribed to the Analytical Iowan podcast on Spotify and YouTube. We'll be back tomorrow. Thanks for listening.